بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. Brothers and sisters in Islam, I greet you with the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dearest brothers and sisters, today is a very important topic, because today we're going to address how can we give good reasons for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the wider community, to the non-Muslim community. How can we articulate a positive, strong case for the existence of Allah? This is a very important topic, because we're living in the West, we're living in America, in Britain, in Europe, and as Muslims, we have a challenge. Because Muslims, or Islam itself, is the last remaining rational religion. And what I mean by rational is not materialist. What I mean by rational is that our text is in line with the aql. As Ibn Taymiyyah wrote and once said, that there is no differentiation, there is no contradiction between the aql and the naql. The intellect and the text itself, meaning the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But what we have to do is have a sound aql, a sound intellect, an intellect that is in tune with reality. So what we have to do as Muslims is to stand up to the challenge of the neo-atheists, the Richard Dawkins of the world, the Sam Harris of the world, the Christopher Hitchens of the world, and say, hold on a second. We have a tradition that is very strong. Not only does it revive people's hearts, but it elevates the intellect of man, and it shows very good reasons that the divine exists. And this is what I want to hopefully show you today, so we could have a conversation today, so we could address strong arguments for the existence of Allah, and respond to atheist contentions, respond to the question that the atheists may pose to the Muslim. Now before I get into the arguments, I want to discuss something important. Something which really talks about our own very existence as human beings. Because we have to realize, brothers and sisters, atheism, in my humble opinion, has nothing to do with science or philosophy. It's to do with psychology. Because in the Quran, if you think about it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rarely mentions the point of atheism. Rather, always talks about tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the power of Allah, the oneness with regards to His names and attributes, the oneness with regards to His rububiyyah, His lordship, uluhiyyah, oneness with regards to singling out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship, and singling Him out with regards to seeking help and aid. This is the Quran. It's full of tawheed, full of the oneness of Allah. And in some places, it mentions, it makes us reflect upon the reality of the universe. Can it come from nothing? Can we exist just out of nothing? Can we come into being out of nothing? And the reason I think this is the case is because atheism is the issue of the heart. And I want to start something that really relates with regards to the issue of the heart. And I want you to listen very carefully. And think about your own very existence when I talk to you about this. Now, brothers and sisters, without Allah, is there any true value in life? Ultimate value. I'm not talking about subjective value, a value that we attribute to our own selves. I'm a nice guy. I want to be an engineer. But I'm talking about the ultimate value for our life. In absence of the divine, in absence of God, in absence of Allah, is the ultimate value. Because think about this. You could spend your whole life trying to be a doctor, or your whole life trying to find the cure to cancer. You could spend your whole life trying to seek justice and peace in the world, and be a politician that does achieve global peace. If our lives just end in the grave, we become worm buffet, does it really matter if we existed at all? Think about this. If there is no akhirah, if there is no divine, if there are none of these concepts, does it really matter even if we existed? If I lived my life as a devil, and you lived your life as an angel, Who cares if there's no divine? Who cares if there's no divine accountability? Similarly, without the divine, brothers and sisters, is there any ultimate meaning? Any ultimate purpose? Now you may say, the meaning of my life is I want to become a doctor. The meaning of my life, I want to become an engineer. But this is self-delusion. You're playing with your own life. Because you're saying, I'm attributing meaning and purpose for my own existence, but the underlying meaning and the underlying purpose, the ultimate purpose for your very being, for your very existence, is non-existent. It is based on a random process, chance. We are a miscarriage of nature. We are the cosmic orphan. Because a human being is left to ask the question, why? We're different from animals because they're driven by their instincts to live their life. However, the human being is a cosmic orphan. This is why the American writer once wrote, being born, the very act of your birth is like being kidnapped and sold into slavery. Because you didn't choose your parents. You chose your parents? Did you choose you being Pakistani? No. Or Bengali or Somali? Did you choose your DNA? Did you choose the very birthplace of your birth? Did you choose the country that you're going to be born into? You didn't choose none of these things, people. You didn't even choose your social biological context. And we say we're free? We're enslaved to these things. So how do we achieve true freedom? Well, we have to understand our context. Are we going to be a slave to social biological processes? Are we going to be a slave to ourselves? Or are we going to be a slave to Allah? Because enslaving ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only thing that will give you true freedom. You may think, I'm free. I can choose to do what I want to do. But having choice doesn't necessitate you are actually free. Because you could be enslaved by your choices. Because your choices are driven by what? Social biological circumstance and your own desires. So you're always enslaved to something, people. So what gives you the true freedom? The true freedom is by enslaving yourself from Allah, ubudiyah, having a servanthood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that removes the shackles from the social biological slavery, from the slavery of context, from the slavery of the system of the world, from the slavery of our own desires. So this is a preamble to our discussion. The topic of atheism is very important because it's about your own existence, your own life. Are you going to be a slave to society? Are you going to be a slave to social biological context? Or are you going to be a slave to yourself? Or are you going to enslave yourself to Allah and free you from these things? Are you going to have ultimate meaning for your life? Are you going to have ultimate value? This is the emotional preamble, the emotional context to our discussion. Because it's important. Because think about it this way. From an atheist worldview, if we are just molecules, we're just matter, then I ask you the question, does it really matter? Think about it. Why do we attribute values to these things? A bombing somewhere of innocent human beings, from an atheist perspective, is not killing of innocents. It's just a rearrangement of molecules. Think about it. Because if you're just carbon and rearrangement of molecules, then we're just a rearrangement of matter, of energy. So this leads nicely for us now to enter into a very rational discussion upon the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we've dealt with the emotional, existential context, which basically means, what does it mean to exist? Without Allah, we don't really have any meaning or value. So brothers and sisters, listen very carefully to some of the arguments I'm going to use to give a good case for the existence of Allah. And these arguments belong to the Quran. Now we have to be very careful when we argue, or when we discuss, or we have a conversation with someone, that we do not use a basis for our discussion, or a premise for our discussion, that doesn't belong in the Quran and the Sunnah. This is very important, because sometimes we could enter into blameworthy kalam. Now blameworthy kalam is not talking and being philosophical, that's fine. It is using your basis for your discussion and it not being related to the Quran and Sunnah. It's very important. So in order for us to have a safe discussion, we must first start with the principles based upon the Quran and Sunnah. Now it doesn't mean you have to mention what the Quran says necessarily, but as long as those ideas exist within our tradition, it's very important, brothers and sisters. So let's take the first argument. The first argument I call is that Allah makes sense of the beginning of the universe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes sense of the beginning of the universe. Now we know, according to the Quran and the Sunnah, that we don't believe in the eternality of the universe. We don't believe the universe is eternal. Okay? This was one of the responses of the atheists. Like a famous atheist called Bertrand Russell, he made the claim and said, you know what? The universe is a brute fact. It's just there, has no beginning, no end, it's eternal. The type of Aristotelian view that unfortunately some of the Muslims adopted in the age where we didn't really understand what the Quran and Sunnah was talking about. This is why the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah came along and actually dealt with these arguments. So the Quran says, no, the universe had a point and had a beginning in time. Now this is exactly what the scientists say, because they talk about the Big Bang. Has everyone heard of the Big Bang? Now, the Big Bang, according to cosmologists, is that space, matter, and energy and time were all created at an event called the singularity. Okay? Called the singularity. And the whole of space-time was actually created. The whole of space-time was actually created. And there are various models of the Big Bang, but each variation of the model necessitates a beginning in time. This is almost a consensus, an ijma'a amongst the cosmologists, amongst the scientists. This is why Alexander Vilenkin, he's one of, if not the best, theoretical cosmologist on the planet. Alexander Vilenkin, he says, look, this is proof now. The cosmologists cannot run away from the fact that the universe began to exist. The universe had a beginning in time. And we also know that the universe must begin to exist, that the universe had a starting point, because if the universe never had a starting point, it would mean that the past of the universe is infinite. If the universe never began, it means the history of the universe is infinite. But I ask you the question, brothers and sisters, can the infinite exist in the material world? Can we have the infinity in the material world? Well, let me give you an example. Say I wanted to give a big hug to Sheikh Yusha Evans, yeah? I want to give him a hug, right? I can't give him a hug until you, brother, give me permission. But you can't give me permission until the brother next to you gives you permission. And if that goes on forever, am I ever going to give the Sheikh a hug? Unfortunately for him, no. Yeah? I won't be able to give him a hug. And that's the reality of the infinite. It doesn't exist in the real world. It would lead to contradictions. And this, if we apply it to the history of the universe, it can't be infinite, people. So from these two perspectives, philosophical if you like, and scientific, the universe began to exist. It's well known. Sometimes you don't even have to discuss this, brothers and sisters. Now, if the universe began to exist, think about the possibilities. And these possibilities are the possibilities the Quran gives us. The Quran talks about the human creation, but if you look at the tafsir, the exegesis, the explanation for these verses, you can apply it to any type of creation, including the whole universe. Now think about this. If the universe began, then it was either created from nothing, it created itself, or it was created. Now let's work together with these brothers and sisters. This is all you need to know. If the universe began, and we know the universe began to exist, it either came from nothing, it created itself, or it was created. Now let's have this discussion. Number one, could the universe come from nothing? Well, out of nothing, nothing comes. This is an undeniable principle, brothers and sisters. It's an undeniable principle. For example, if I said to you, on my left appeared a grey rhino, would I claim that it came out from nothing? Would you agree with me that it could just pop into existence out of nothing? Or if on my right I had an Eskimo, and he popped into existence out of nothing, would you agree with such a concept? If you heard a noise, would you say that noise just appeared from nowhere? Would you? This is an undeniable principle. Out of nothing, nothing comes. This is why even non-Muslim thinkers agree with this. Like P.J. Swart, in his publication About Time, he says, if there's anything we can find inconceivable, is that something could arise from nothing. Now the second option is, the universe created itself. Now why would we think this is crazy? Why would we think self-creation is crazy? Well, listen to these few points. Firstly, for something to self-create, it means it was in existence and not in existence at the same time. Now, can something exist and not exist at the same time? Now, if you don't understand this, let me give you a nice example, and I'll ask you a question. Can your mother give birth to herself? That's what we're saying. For the universe to create itself is like saying your mother gave birth to herself, or you gave birth to your own self. Is that a possibility, brothers and sisters? Exactly no. So we know self-creation is an impossibility. So what's the final option? The final option is that the universe has a creator, or a cause. And we know this creator must be all-powerful because it created the whole universe. We know this creator must be intelligent because it created the laws of the universe, and a lawgiver indicates that it's intelligent. We know this creator or cause must be uncaused. Why are we saying this? Because some people say, well, who created the creator then? Well, we could answer this by saying, if we do this all the time, then we'll never have creation. Now, work with me here. If we say who created the creator, what stops us from saying who created that creator, that created the creator, that created the creator? Sorry. And then what stops us from saying who created that creator, that created that creator, that created that creator, that created that creator, that created creation? But then what stops us from saying, well, who created that creator, that 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 created creation? If I do this forever, would we ever have creation? Would we ever have creation? No. Just like the example I gave you by hugging the sheikh. I would never hug the sheikh if I had to ask permission from someone and that permission had to go on forever. Similarly, with creation and the creator, it just wouldn't make sense if we have a forever chain of creators. It just wouldn't make sense. So necessarily, he has to be uncreated. So what we've done here, brothers and sisters, just using our aql, we've come to agree with what the Quran said 1400 years ago. We know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the 112th chapter, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Say, Allah is one, the uniquely one, ahad, uniquely one. He's the eternal, the absolute. He begets not, nor was he begotten, and there is nothing like unto him. So look what we've done, just by analyzing the universe that it began to exist. We know it couldn't come out of nothing. We know it can't self-create. Therefore, it must have a creator. Very simple argument. And wallahi, brothers and sisters, you pose this to an atheist, and the majority of them won't have a way out. It's a simple argument based upon the logic of the Quran. Universe began to exist. It either came from nothing, it created itself, or it had a creator. Absolutely simple. If there are other options, then entertain the options, but there are no other options. So our explanation is the best explanation. Look how simple that is. And you guys could go out into your community and actually discuss this with an atheist. Say, look, we know that the universe began to exist. It's not eternal. If that is the case, it either came from nothing, it created itself, or it has a creator. Isn't this simple in essence, brothers and sisters? So, that's the first argument. Now we have another argument, which is like the design of the universe. Let me give you the simple form. Now, I would like you to imagine something. Come with a journey to me. Say we're on a camel, okay? We're riding on a camel, and we're riding in the vastness of the Sahara Desert. And in the Sahara Desert, we see this. A BlackBerry, or if you like, an iPhone. Yeah? We see an iPhone or a BlackBerry in the middle of the desert, And we scratch our heads and we raise the question, how did it come to be? Now there are some possibilities. The first possibility, it came there by chance. Somehow in the desert, the oil came up and it created plastic to form the casing. And the sand melted away to form the glass and the silicon. And somehow, by these random processes, you found your own mobile phone number on the phone, in the phone. That's the first option. The second option, it was put there, or it was designed to be put there. Now, what's the best explanation? That it came via random process, via chance, which is a high improbability, or it was put there by design? Well, we know the best explanation is design, because the chance hypothesis is not a rational hypothesis. Do you know why? Because these probabilities are so improbable. To use them as an explanation would mean you can't have a conversation anymore. You could say to an atheist, you know what, Mr. Atheist? I don't believe my mother's my mother anymore. I believe that she's a pink elephant, and she was born on Pluto, and she flew here on a Mustang. Now he may say to me, Mr. Zodzis, you're crazy. And I may reply, but there's a chance. That's how silly chance is. These type of improbabilities are so mind-reeling, so crazy, that to use them as a justification for anything just means you can't have a conversation anymore. So the best explanation is design. So if we expand this example of the desert and the mobile phone to the whole universe itself, which is far more complex than a mobile phone, then we have the only one explanation, which is design. Which is design. Now, an atheist's response to this, and you can find this in Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, on page 157, 158. He says, you know what? Design is a strong argument, but he said, I have a problem. Well, who designed the designer? Now think about it. He said, who designed the designer? And we could respond to this in two ways. The first way is, even in science, the best explanation doesn't require an explanation. Think about this. If we went onto the moon, and we were digging away, and we found a BlackBerry, some parts of the camera, the microphone, photographs, pottery, arrowheads. What would be the best explanation? The best explanation would be is that there was some kind of civilization. Now, if someone comes along and says, you can't claim such a thing, we don't know what their names are, we don't know where they came from, does that mean our explanation is not the best explanation anymore? Of course it does. But also, if you say who designed the designer, then we could say the same thing. Well, who designed that designer that designed the designer? Then we could say exactly the same thing. Who designed that designer that designed the 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 universe? If we do this forever, are we ever going to have design, the universe itself? No. So to claim who designed the designer is equivalent of saying that there is no universe. So there must be an undesigned designer. So that's the second argument, brothers and sisters. So there's two arguments we've posed here. The first argument is that Allah makes sense of the beginning of the universe. The second argument we've posed is that Allah makes sense of the design of the universe. So we give a very simple example with the mobile phone. Now, I want to give you another argument, which is the Quran itself. Because I believe the Quran is a proof for the existence of Allah. Because if you could prove this book is from the divine, or you can't find any natural reason for this book, you can't explain it naturally, you can't explain it came from a man, you can't explain it came from anything intelligent within the material world, then the best explanation is it came from the supernatural. The best explanation is that it came from the divine. Now let me explain this for you. We know the Quran is an intrusive book. It's a very special book, brothers and sisters. Because the Quran is the only religious book that seeks to engage with your aql, with your intellect. It seeks to engage with your nafsiyah, with your disposition, with your psychology, with your heart, with your soul, with your fitrah, with your natural state. And the Quran does this in a forceful way. But this forcefulness is not negative. it's very positive. Because it does this and it achieves this by answering profound questions. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And within themselves, do they not see? أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Do they not reflect within themselves? أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Have you not seen the camel and how it was created? وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus to explain our signs and evidences in detail for those who reflect. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Coming from the Arabic triliteral stem, the root of Arabic, فَكَرَى, which we know, according to the classical dictionaries, has a meaning of the thing that you're reflecting upon. Don't do it in a shallow way. The thing that you're reflecting upon, be deep. Understand the implication of what this thing is. What does it mean? So the Quran calls for deep thinking. So we see the Quran is a book for a thinking human being. It encourages thinking. It really plays with our mind with good questions about man, life, and the universe. And it also gives us things to think about our own self, reflecting within ourselves. Now you may think, wow, amazing book. An atheist might say, that's a very interesting book. It makes you think. It asks questions. It doesn't say believe just because I said so. It's not based on blind faith. But the Quran goes even further than this, brothers and sisters. It goes even further than this. As the Quran says in Surah Baqarah, verse 23, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزِلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And if you are in doubt, look, the Quran is talking to the doubters, the skeptics, the atheists, the humanists, the philosophers, the scientists, the thinkers. Everybody. If you're in doubt about this book that we have revealed to our servant, referring to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then bring one chapter like it. One chapter. And call on your witnesses and your supporters besides Allah, if you are truthful. In kuntum sadiqeen. If you're truthful in your claim. And we know the original background to this verse, the explanation. According to the Mufassirun, like we have chains of narration related to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, Qurtubi, Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Kathir, Tafsir Jalalain. We have an ijma'ah of the ulama that this verse has something to do with the language of the Quran. The uniqueness, the brilliance, the eloquence, the peak of eloquence, the sea of rhetoric of the Quran itself. Because we know 1400 years ago, when the Quran was revealed, it was revealed upon a people who were the best at expressing themselves in the Arabic tongue. This is why the Orientalists, those people who studied Islam and the Oriental sciences, claimed that the people 1400 years ago were Arabic linguists par excellence, which basically means they were the best. This is why the historian Ibn Rashid, he writes that the socialization of society was built so much that they would celebrate on two things: the birth of a boy and when a poet rose amongst them. A poet rose amongst them. And the Quran came down to challenge them and said, if you don't think it's from the divine, then bring something like the Quran. And they all failed. This is why Walid ibn al-Mughira, the most famous poet of the time, claimed and exclaimed, by Allah, this is not from a human being. This is what he said. Even swore by Allah. And the reason we know the Quran is truly something that cannot be matched. In technical language, it means inimitable. You cannot imitate its language. You cannot imitate its form. The reason for this is because the Quran has a unique form. It's not like Shakespeare. Who's heard of Shakespeare? Put your hand up. Okay, also known as Sheikh Zabur. Yeah? So Sheikh Zabur, for example, you may like some of his stuff based on subjective experience. For example, O Romeo, wherefore art thou, O Romeo, deny thy father and deny thy name. In Romeo and Juliet. Or you can make it more Islamic. O Abdullah, deny thy mother, deny thy tribe. Yeah? The point I'm trying to say is that it's not based on how we appreciate the language. The Quran is an eloquent book. It is a peak of eloquence. But it's also unique in the mechanics of the language, the form of the language, This is why the Orientalist A.J. Arbery, he said the Quran is a unique fusion of poetry and prose. Because the Quran cannot be described as poetry, because it doesn't conform to any of the Arabic rhythmical patterns called al-bihar. We also know it cannot be prose, because it's not straightforward speech, and it's not rhyme prose. Rather, it's Quran. This is why David J. Stewart, which is the only Orientalist of our modern times discussing the unique form of the Quran, says the Quran is none of these things, it's unique. This is why it hasn't been matched. Now you may think, I have to know Arabic to appreciate this. I have to know Arabic to know that the Quran is a linguistic miracle. No, you don't. And I want you to take this journey with me. I want you guys to put your hand up if you believe that Greece as a country exists. We all believe that Greece exists. I ask you a question. How do you know? Who's been to Greece before? Oh my God, none of you have been to Greece before? But you believe Greece exists? Now you may say, but I've seen it on a map, Hamza. Okay, so if I took this book and imagine it's a map, and I drew a map, and in the Pacific Ocean, I put a triangle. And on that triangle I said, this is the island, and it's called Fufula. And I'm from the island, I'm a Fufulonian. Would you believe me? Now, have you spoken to a Greek person before? In Greece? No. So how do you know, brothers? You have yaqeen. You have certainty that Greece does exist. How do you know? Videos. So if I made a video of the Fufulonians, yeah? Would you believe me? Just because you saw a video? Maybe it's a mass conspiracy, akhi. On YouTube. Even on YouTube, if we did a video on YouTube saying, for example, I'm Chinese. 你很漂亮. 我喜欢英国茶. 我们出去当了. Would you believe me? That I'm Chinese? Just because I make that claim? So what? So why? Why on earth do you believe that Greece exists? Social studies? According to social studies, I'm a terrorist, man. You're going to believe I'm a terrorist? So why do we believe Greece exists? Sorry? You're close. The uncle was talking about the certain knowledge. But how do we know? Yes. MashaAllah, takbir. You are a sheikh? MashaAllah. Very, very good. The uncle was saying it's tawatur, which basically means it's the science of mutawatir reporting, which is recurrent reporting. It's basically testimony. It's been testified by so many different people at different times and places that never met each other. To claim Greece doesn't exist would be claiming a mass conspiracy. This is why, for example, C.A. Cody in his book Testimony, he raises this issue and says, we don't even truly know that the world is round. But we know we'll be mad if we claim it's flat. Because you've never felt the world before, have you? Or you've seen it on a map, but that's secondary sources. How do you know it's not like a fake globe? Do you see? You may see the mathematics, but you may not even understand it. We agree with it because it's tawatur, it's recurrent reporting, it's mass testimony. Now, what I'm going to do now, brothers and sisters, is for you to reject the Quran will be equivalent of rejecting that Greece exists. Because the Quran is also